Welcome to Save Point AFK. This is the Zelda Timeline. Chapter 1. Before Hyrule. There was a time, before sky or sea or soil, before even light itself. A silent expanse stretched endlessly, a void untouched by wind or warmth. It was in this stillness that the three golden goddesses descended. Their coming marked the first stirring of existence, the first breath of what would one day be called Hyrule. They came not as mortals might imagine, with faces or form, but as living principles, the embodiment of creation itself. Din, the goddess of power, burned like a star newly born. Her arrival was fire and upheaval, the striking of a hammer against nothingness. Wherever her hands turned, the raw clay of existence began to take shape. Mountains rose like the spines of ancient beasts, and rivers of molten stone carved the first scars into the sleeping world. Nehru followed, the goddess of wisdom. She carried in her wake a calm blue light that cooled Din's flame and gave meaning to her work. It was Nehru who laid the laws of the universe, the quiet principles that would one day become time, gravity, and truth. She whispered order into chaos, defining day from night, beginning from end. Her wisdom became the pulse of reality, a harmony that every blade of grass and beam of sunlight would echo for all ages to come. Then came Faeror, the goddess of courage. From her heart flowed the spark of life. She danced upon the newborn earth, and where her feet touched the soil, it grew green and alive. Trees rose from her laughter. Beasts opened their eyes beneath her song. It was Faeror who gave the world its spirit, the unseen essence that would later become souls, the energy that binds all living things in the eternal weave. Together, the three goddesses shaped the world, each balancing the other. Din forged, Nehru ordered, and Faeror gave life. When their work was done, they departed for the heavens, leaving behind only a golden relic, the Triforce, a perfect embodiment of their combined essence. The Triforce was not a weapon, nor a tool. It was a silent promise of balance. Whoever held it could shape reality itself, but only if their heart was unshaken, unmoved by chaos or imbalance. Power without wisdom would destroy. Wisdom without courage would wither, and courage without power would crumble. Only in unity could the world thrive. And so, the goddesses left their golden mark at the center of creation, a divine echo meant to preserve the harmony they had woven. In the ages that followed, the world began to shift and settle. The mountains cooled, the rivers calmed, and the wind began to wander. From the golden dust of creation, new beings awoke, spirits of flame and wind and stone. Some scholars of the later ages would call them the first spirits of the land, ancient custodians who maintained the world in the goddess's absence. It is said that among these spirits was one unlike the rest, one whose grace and compassion set her apart. Her name was Hylia. Hylia was not a goddess in the truest essence. She was a divine spirit, born from the Triforce's lingering light. Yet she carried in her heart the wisdom of Nehru, the courage of Faeror, and the will of Din. It was through her that the goddesses entrusted the protection of the Triforce to the mortal realm. She became the first guardian of the sacred relic, vowing to preserve its power for the good of all living beings. In her care, the newborn world flourished. Forests thickened, rivers ran clear, and creatures, both great and small, lived in balance. The land was pure, untouched by ambition or greed. But creation is rarely still. From the cracks between the worlds, something began to stir. Not a spirit, nor a god, but a hunger, a will that sought to consume rather than create. It came from a realm beyond the sight of mortals, beyond even the heavens where the goddesses had gone. This being would come to be known as Demise, the Demon King, the eternal shadow cast by creation's light. Demise was not born of the goddesses' will, but what they had left behind, the imbalance, the unclaimed darkness of the void. As life began to bloom, so too did decay. As light grew stronger, so too did shadow. Demise embodied this law, the necessary reflection of all that exists. He looked upon Hylia's world and saw beauty, and in beauty he saw power. For every living thing glowed faintly with the golden light of the Triforce, the divine energy that threaded through creation. He sought to claim that light for himself, to reshape existence not through balance, but through domination. And so began the first great conflict. Hylia, though radiant and wise, had never known war. The spirits of the land rallied to her side. The winds of Eldin, the waters of Lanayru, the forests of Faron, all the primordial forces joined to defend the sacred world. Yet Demise's power was immense. His flames scorched the earth and turned rivers to ash. His laughter rolled like thunder through the heavens. The world trembled beneath their struggle. Mountains shattered, seas boiled, and the skies turned red with smoke. Fearing the Triforce would fall into Demise's grasp, Hylia gathered what remained of her strength. With the aid of the surviving spirits, she raised a portion of the earth into the heavens, sending her chosen people to safety above the clouds. That floating refuge would one day be known as Skyloft. Beneath it, the surface world was left scarred and broken, a wasteland of ancient fire. The remnants of Demise's army wandered the land, monstrous echoes of their master's rage. Hylia's victory came at great cost. She sealed Demise away, binding his essence in a prison of stone deep beneath the surface. But the battle had drained her divine essence. Her once radiant light began to fade. Knowing her time was ending, she devised a plan, one that would span countless generations. The Triforce, though divine, could not judge between good and evil. It would grant the wish of any who touched it, whether for creation or ruin. To ensure it would never fall into the hands of darkness, Hylia resolved to pass its guardianship to a race capable of choice, capable of both failure and redemption, mortals. But to do this, she would have to relinquish her divinity. In an act of sacrifice, Hylia shed her immortal form and was reborn as a mortal woman, Zelda, the first incarnation of her spirit. In time, the cycle of Zelda and her destined hero would begin, bound forever to oppose the shadow of demise. Though the goddesses had long since departed, their legacy lived on through her. As the centuries passed, the story of creation faded into myth. The people who once dwelled upon the surface now lived above the clouds, their memories of the ruined earth below softened by time. They spoke in whispers of the surface, a forbidden land said to be home to monsters and danger beyond imagining. Yet beneath those clouds, the ancient scars still glowed faintly with divine light. The Triforce lay hidden, its golden triangles untouched, waiting for the day when courage, wisdom, and power would reunite in balance once more. Even the seal upon demise pulsed in the deep dark like a heartbeat waiting to resume. It is here, in the silence between ages, that the Legend of Hyrule truly begins. A legend born from sacrifice, memory, and the endless rhythm of rebirth. The world would sleep, but the goddesses' work was not yet finished. Their light shimmered in every sunrise, their will whispered in every breath of wind. And somewhere, in the drifting sky above the clouds, a girl who bore Hylia's soul would one day awaken to destiny. Chapter 2: The Skyward Era. Far above the scars of the silent world, a kingdom floated upon the wind. It drifted through seas of cloud like a forgotten dream, its islands bathed in soft light and song. This was Skyloft, the sanctuary Hylia had raised long ago to protect her chosen children from the ruin below. Centuries had passed since the battle that sealed demise, and the memory of the surface world had turned to legend, an old story whispered in classrooms and sung in lullabies. The people of Skyloft lived gently. They farmed, studied, and celebrated the festival of the goddess each year. And though they could not see the land beneath the clouds, they felt a quiet faith that Hylia still watched over them. Each person was bonded from birth to a loftwing, a great bird of living color that carried them through the sky, a symbol of freedom, of trust, and of the link between heaven and earth. Among them lived a young knight in training, a boy with eyes as clear as the morning sky. His name was Link, and though he did not yet know it, he carried the echo of a promise made long before his birth. He seemed ordinary by every measure, a bit late to his classes, a touch too kind-hearted for the drills of knighthood, but the goddess had marked him long ago. In dreams, he saw a radiant figure calling his name, a song beneath his consciousness, like wind stirring in the grass, And then there was Zelda, bright and spirited, beloved by all who met her. She, too, seemed ordinary, or so she believed, yet in her laughter lived the resonance of Hylia's divinity, the soul of a goddess hidden within mortal flesh. She and Link had been close since childhood, their lives entwined like the flight paths of their loft wings. It was said that when they flew together, the skies themselves seemed to sing. On the day of the wing ceremony, Skyloft gathered to witness who among the trainees would prove worthy of joining the knights. Link's crimson loftwing had not been seen that morning, stolen away by jealous rivals. But destiny has little patience for interference. Link found his bird, soared into the blue, and won the ceremony. When Zelda placed the ceremonial sailcloth into his hands, she smiled as though she remembered something from another life. The wind shifted, clouds darkened, and the sky itself cracked open. A storm of black lightning tore through the heavens, and from the churning clouds descended a vortex of shadow. Zelda's cry echoed as she was pulled into the abyss, swallowed by the storm. Link dove after her, but the wind caught him and cast him back. When he awoke, Skyloft's quiet peace was broken. Zelda was gone. That night, the dream returned, clearer than ever. A voice called his name, gentle yet commanding. He followed it to the statue of the goddess, where the earth trembled and parted. From the light emerged a being of crystal and calm. Phi, spirit of the goddess's sword. Her words carried the clarity of pure logic, yet her tone was almost tender. Master, you are chosen by the goddess. The time of prophecy is at hand. From the chamber beneath the statue, Link drew a blade of radiant steel, the goddess sword, precursor to all blades that would follow. With Phi as his guide, he descended below the clouds, piercing the barrier between sky and surface for the first time in an age. What he found below was not the paradise of legend, but a wounded world, forests overgrown, deserts buried in time, volcanoes still burning with Din's forgotten fire. This was the surface, and it was here that Zelda had fallen. Zelda's path, though unseen by Link at first, was guided by fate. Saved from the storm by a guardian named Impa, an ancient servant of Hylia, she learned of her true nature. In her veins stirred the last divine spark of the goddess herself. Her purpose was to purify her soul, to shed her mortal fragility, so that she might seal demise once more, should he awaken. Link's journey mirrored hers, though neither yet understood how closely their destinies aligned. Through trial and patience, he tempered his courage, mastering the powers hidden within the surface realms. Each province, Faron, Eldin, Lanayru, tested him differently: forest, fire, and time. He gathered sacred flames, each one igniting the next stage of his blade's evolution. With every trial, the goddess sword grew brighter, closer to its true form. When he knelt before the final flame, the sword erupted in light that shook the heavens. Fi's voice shimmered like a bell. The power of the goddesses has awakened within this blade. It shall be known henceforth as the Master Sword. Thus was born the weapon that would one day be called the Blade of Evil's Bane. Pure, eternal, unyielding, forged not merely of metal, but of courage made manifest. A sword that sleeps until a hero worthy of its edge awakens it. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the surface, something stirred. The seal that bound Demise had weakened with time, and from it rose his devoted servant, Girahim. Pale as polished bone and cruel as a serpent, Girahim sought to resurrect his master by capturing the soul of the goddess reborn. He moved with unsettling grace, a mockery of elegance, and wherever he went, the land twisted to his will. Through temple and ruin, Link pursued him again and again. Every battle between them felt like an echo of an older war, one that neither completely remembered. Girahim taunted him as the boy chosen by the sky. Yet there was fear behind his laughter, for with every clash, Link's resolve deepened. The Master Sword's light grew stronger. At last, their paths converged within the Temple of Hylia, deep in the past, before even Skyloft had risen. Time itself had bent to the goddess's will, allowing Zelda to travel back and complete her transformation. There, she relinquished her mortal self, sealing her power into the world to maintain Demise's prison. She fell into a deep sleep, surrounded by light. Her last words to Link, gentle and resolute. When I awaken, it will be to see you again. And so, the hero who once knew only the calm winds of Skyloft knelt before her, sword in hand, and vowed to guard her. Yet the end came sooner than he expected. Girahim, desperate and mad, seized Zelda from her crystal sleep and carried her into the heart of the earth, into the very prison of his master. There, beneath the scorched sky of the sealed grounds, he performed the final rite. The seal shattered, the world groaned, and from the abyss rose Demise, reborn in fire and hatred. He was vast, terrible, beautiful in his ruinous majesty. The air burned with his presence. The ground turned to glass beneath his feet. He looked upon Link not as an equal, but as a curiosity, a spark of light daring to stand before the sun. Their battle shook the ages. Steel rang against flame. Thunder met silence. Link fought not for victory, but for remembrance, for every age that would come after. And when his strength faltered, he raised the Master Sword high, calling upon every ounce of courage in his soul. The blade struck true. Demise fell. But even dying, he laughed, a deep, resonant sound that rolled through the dawn. This curse I leave upon you, and upon all who share your blood of spirit. The eternal cycle of our hate shall bind us until the end of time. Thus, the curse of demise was born. From it would spring the endless reincarnations of the three destined souls: the hero, bearer of courage; the princess, keeper of wisdom; and the king of darkness, inheritor of power. Their struggle would repeat throughout history, reshaping the world in an eternal rhythm of conflict and renewal. Link returned to Zelda as dawn broke across the surface. She awoke to see the sky clear for the first time in centuries. Together, they lifted the Triforce, Hylia's last gift, and with it, restored balance to the scarred world. The land bloomed again. Rivers returned. Life stirred. Skyloft's people descended, their floating islands lowering gently to meet the ground. The kingdom of Hyrule was born, not yet by name, but by spirit. Fi, her purpose fulfilled, spoke one final time. Master, my duty is complete. May we meet again in another time. And with that, she entered eternal sleep within the Master Sword, her consciousness bound to the weapon's heart. It would rest in its pedestal until destiny called upon it again. In the centuries that followed, the events of the Skyward Era faded into legend. The people built temples where Hylia once stood, carving her likeness into stone. They named the surface lands after the three provinces that had tested their first hero: Faron, Eldin, and Lanayru, unknowing that each bore the blessing of the goddesses themselves. The Master Sword remained at rest, its blade gleaming faintly whenever the wind carried whispers of darkness. And somewhere beyond mortal reach, the shadow of demise waited, patient, unending, and inevitable. The stage was set. Hyrule's history had begun, though its people would forget its true origin. From now on, each age would tell its own story, each legend building upon the bones of the last. But the pattern was set in stone. Where there is darkness, light will rise. Where there is power, courage will answer. And where there is sorrow, wisdom will guide the way. The sky had given birth to the earth, and the earth to legend. Hylia's dream would continue forever. Chapter 3: The Founding of Hyrule. When the goddess's light faded and the clouds above were no longer a ceiling, but a horizon, the world felt vast again. The people of Skyloft, those who had once lived between the barrier separating sky from surface, descended to the world that their ancestors had forgotten. They came cautiously at first, for the land was wild and ancient. Trees, older than their oldest songs, whispered in the wind, and the earth carried the quiet tremor of battles fought in another age. They found ruins, great pillars of stone half buried in the soil, remnants of the temples Hylia's hero once walked. And though they could not name them, something in their hearts recognized the sanctity of these places. They built their homes nearby, raised villages along the rivers and valleys, and in time, the first kingdom of mortals took root. They named the land Hyrule after the goddess whose dream had given it life. The Sky People had not descended alone. In their care was the sacred relic left by the golden goddesses, the Triforce, which Hylia had protected since the dawn of the world. It was now entrusted to mortal hands, housed in a grand temple at the heart of the new kingdom. The people believed that as long as the Triforce remained in their keeping, peace would endure. But the world was young, and peace was a fragile thing. For many generations, Hyrule thrived. The descendants of the hero and the goddess watched over it, sometimes in person, sometimes from afar. Legends spoke of a royal line born with the blood of Hylia herself, carrying the wisdom of the goddess within. They ruled not through fear, but through the belief that their own crown was a covenant between heaven and earth. Yet as the centuries passed, ambition grew. Not all who gazed upon the Triforce saw it as a symbol of balance. Some saw it as a key to reshape the world in their own image. Scholars and kings, warlords and mystics, all hungered for its promise. The age of chaos had begun. Records from this era are fragmentary, passed down as legend, but they speak of a time when Hyrule was divided by endless war. Dozens of would-be monarchs rose and fell, each claiming divine right to the relic's power. Cities burned beneath banners of gold and crimson, and the rivers that once reflected the sky ran dark with ash. The Triforce itself, though divine, did not choose sides. It waited, dormant, shining faintly within its temple, while mortals fought beneath its shadow. When a hand unworthy reached for it, the relic would vanish, splitting into its three parts: power, wisdom, and courage. Each piece sought a vessel whose heart reflected its nature, disappearing from the grasp of those who would wield it selfishly. To some, this was divine punishment. To others, it was opportunity. Among those who sought to restore balance was a people set apart. The Sheikah, servants of the goddess and protectors of her bloodline. They were born of the earliest priests of Hylia, those who remembered her light most clearly. While kingdoms rose and fell, the Sheikah endured in secret. They watched from the shadows, guiding the descendants of the goddess's line, keeping alive the teachings that most had forgotten. Their eyes, crimson with devotion, became a symbol of hidden wisdom and silent vigilance. They built shrines deep beneath the soil, storing knowledge too sacred or too dangerous for common hands. Among them were artifacts of astonishing design, crystals that spoke, towers that responded to thought, machines that moved with the precision of clockwork. These remnants would later be called Sheikah technology, though in truth they were remnants of an older divine science, echoes of the goddess's time. Through their efforts, the royal line of Hyrule survived the chaos, and when at last the wars subsided, a single king emerged to unite the land. The first true monarch of Hyrule is unnamed in surviving records, though later generations would call him the King of the Golden Era. Under his reign, Hyrule became more than a kingdom. It became a symbol. He decreed that the Triforce would remain sealed within the sacred realm, a divine space separate from the mortal world. Only one whose heart was balanced, neither consumed by power, wisdom, nor courage, could enter and claim it whole. Thus began the Golden Era of prosperity, a time when the kingdom flourished. Temples rose across the land, each honoring one of the goddesses. Din's shrine blazed in the volcanic peaks of Eldin. Nehru's temple mirrored the flowing waters of Lanayru. Faeror's stood deep in the forests of Faron, shrouded in eternal green. And at the center of them all, the Temple of Time was built, a sanctum where mortals could commune with the divine. Atop its altar rested the Master Sword, the very blade that had ended Demise's reign. No mortal could touch it unless the goddess's spirit deemed them worthy. It became both symbol and safeguard, a reminder that true strength was born not of conquest, but of purpose. But the Golden Ages were not eternal. As centuries turned to millennia, the stories of creation blurred into myth once more. Children learned them as bedtime tales. Scholars debated whether the goddesses had ever truly walked the earth. The Triforce was spoken of in reverent tones, yet few remembered the weight of its promise. Even within the royal court, ambition began to flicker again. The blood of the goddess diluted with time, and though the line of Hylia endured, it no longer carried her power as brightly as before. In distant provinces, warlords stirred. In the mountains, tribes whispered of the old flames of Din, and beneath the desert's edge, a people shunned by Hyrule began to rise. They were the Gerudo, a proud desert race of warriors. Their customs were old, their matriarchs wise, but once in many generations, a single male was born among them, one destined to be their king. He would unite their tribes under a single banner and lead them beyond the sands toward the kingdom that had long ignored them. But that story would come later. For now, Hyrule basked in the illusion of lasting peace. During the later centuries of the Golden Era, the Temple of Time became the kingdom's spiritual heart. It was said that the very stones of its walls resonated with the breath of the goddesses. Within it, the Ocarina of Time was kept, a sacred instrument crafted by the royal family and said to echo through the corridors of time itself. The Sheikah maintained its inner sanctum, ensuring that the path to the sacred realm could only be opened by those chosen by destiny. Even in peace, however, the Sheikah remained vigilant. They knew what others had forgotten. The darkness never truly dies. It sleeps, waiting for light to grow complacent. And somewhere, beyond the desert and beneath the stars, the seed of that darkness had already begun to stir. In later ages, chroniclers would describe this period as the calm before the storm, the still breath before destiny resumes its motion. The forces of power, wisdom, and courage were once more drifting towards their hosts, unseen but inevitable. The spirit of the goddess would soon awaken again in a princess of royal blood. The essence of courage would take form in a young hero, born unaware of his calling. and the lingering hatred of demise, ever reborn in different guise, would find its vessel in the heart of a desert king. The legend was preparing to repeat itself, but before it could, the pieces had to fall into place. The kingdom, the relic, the sword, and the song, all had to exist, ready for the moment when destiny would weave them together. And so, as one age ended and another prepared to begin, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The rivers ran clear, the fields swayed in the wind, and the spires of Hyrule Castle gleamed like beacons against the horizon. But in the stillness beneath the castle's foundation, the Sheikah kept their watch. They inscribed the old prophecies into stone, their eyes ever turned towards the sacred realm, for they alone remembered what the others had forgotten, that peace is not the end of the story, it is the pause between chapters. The age of chaos had been overcome, but in its ashes lay the seeds of every future conflict. The rise of the first kings would lead, in time, to the rise of the greatest hero, and far beyond the fields of Hyrule, in the endless sand and shadow, the one destined to challenge him was already waiting to be born. The dawn of legend was drawing near. The era of the hero of time was about to begin. Chapter 4: The Ocarina of Time and the Split of Reality. The Golden Era had lasted so long that peace itself had become a memory people no longer noticed. Children played in fields that once were battle plains, and the Triforce, sealed safely in the sacred realm, was spoken of only in ceremony. But destiny does not rest forever. When light grows complacent, shadow begins to move. Far to the west lay the Gerudo Desert, harsh and glittering beneath the sun. Its people were strong and proud, a sisterhood ruled by wise matriarchs. Once in a century, a single man was born among them, fated by tradition to be their king. In this century, that man's name was Ganondorf. He possessed a mind sharper than steel and an ambition vast enough to swallow the horizon. Where others saw sand and hardship, he saw the world that had denied his people. He sought a power great enough to remake it, and so his gaze turned toward Hyrule. At the heart of Hyrule stood the castle, white stone gleaming like sunlight on water. There ruled King Hyrule, wise and fair, father to a young princess whose name was known by every heart in the realm, Zelda. In her eyes burned an ancient calm, the quiet certainty of one who had dreamed of other lives. She studied the prophecies kept by the Sheikah and learned of the sacred relic that could grant any wish. Her tutors told her it was only a myth, yet her heart whispered otherwise. One summer morning, the king welcomed emissaries from the desert. Among them was Ganondorf, cloaked in shadow. He knelt before the throne with a smile that hid a storm. The king, hoping for peace, offered him friendship. Zelda watched from the castle courtyard and felt a chill, like wind passing through stone. That night, she dreamed of the Triforce shining above a dark horizon, and of eyes burning gold beneath it. Far from the castle, deep within the Kokiri forest, time moved differently. The Kokiri children never aged, protected by the guardian spirit, the great Deku Tree. Among them lived a boy who was not quite like the others. He had no fairy companion, and though he smiled, there was a loneliness in him, as if he had been misplaced by the world. His name was Link, and when the great Deku Tree fell ill from a curse sent by dark forces, Link was summoned to its roots. With a wooden sword and the courage of a heart too young to know fear, he entered the tree and broke the curse, but arrived too late to save it. With its last breath, the forest guardian gave him a stone, emerald like the forest itself, and sent him to Hyrule Castle. "Go to the Princess of Destiny," it whispered. "The world's fate now lies beyond these woods." So began the journey of the hero of time. Link's path carried him across the growing kingdom, through the fiery mountains of the Gorons and the deep waters of the Zora domain. He earned the trust of their peoples and gathered the sacred stones that opened the way to the Temple of Time. Each stone resonated with ancient power, and as he carried them, echoes of the goddess's light stirred within him. Though still a child, he bore the courage of ages. At the castle, he met Zelda. Together, they shared their visions of Ganondorf's deceit, of dark clouds rising, of the sacred realm itself. They vowed to stop him, but prophecy often moves faster than understanding. Even as they planned, Ganondorf seized the chance they created. The gate to the Temple of Time opened, and the path to the Triforce lay bare. Link entered first, believing he could protect it. He drew the Master Sword from its pedestal, its blade gleaming with the same holy light that had ended demise long ago. But the sword was more than a weapon. It was a key. By drawing it, Link opened the door to the sacred realm and sealed himself within a chamber of timeless sleep. For 7 years, he slumbered while destiny caught its breath. Ganondorf followed. He entered the sacred realm and laid his hands upon the Triforce, but his heart was unbalanced, filled with ambition, not harmony. The relic split apart. Only the Triforce of power remained in his grasp. The other pieces fled, one to Zelda's spirit, one to the sleeping hero. Thus, the balance of the world tilted, and Hyrule fell into darkness. When Link awoke, the boy of the forest was gone. In his place stood a young man, burdened by 7 years he had never lived. The once bright kingdom lay in ruin. Castles broken, villages burned, the skies a bruise of smoke and thunder. Ganondorf, now the self-proclaimed King of Evil, ruled from a twisted citadel that pierced the clouds. Guided by the mysterious warrior Sheik, whose movements were swift as wind and whose words carried the calm of prophecy, Link set out to awaken the 7 sages who could seal the Demon King away. One by one he freed them from forest, fire, water, shadow, spirit, and light. Each sage, upon awakening, remembered the ancient covenant that when darkness rises, the chosen hero will return. Together, they prepared the seal that would bind Ganondorf once more. Before the end, Sheik revealed her identity. The warrior was none other than Princess Zelda, hiding in plain sight to guide the hero she had once dreamed of. When she removed her veil, the Triforce of Wisdom shimmered upon her hand, the divine counterpart to the courage glowing within Link's. Together, they confronted the Dark Tower. Their ascent through Ganondorf's fortress was like climbing through the bones of a fallen god. Music twisted through the halls, a haunting echo of the Ocarina's songs. At the top, the usurper waited, throne of black iron behind him, the Triforce blazing in his palm. The battle was long, measured not in strikes, but in will. Lightning danced across the shattered windows. The castle groaned as if the land itself resisted his power. When at last Ganondorf fell, the fortress began to collapse. Zelda and Link escaped as stone and fire consumed the night. But evil rarely dies cleanly. From the rubble rose a monstrous form, Ganon, stripped of humanity, a beast of pure hatred, wielding twin blades of flame. A final duel raged beneath a crimson sky. Link, guided by Zelda and armed with the Master Sword, struck true. Ganondorf's body fell, and the sage's chant rose like wind through mountains. Ancient ones of the earth, seal away this evil. The portal opened. Chains of light wrapped around the fallen king, drawing him into the void. As he vanished, he spoke a final curse, the echo of demise reborn. I shall rise again, as long as those who bear the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero endure. The gate closed. Hyrule breathed again. When the dust settled, Zelda returned to Link. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of understanding. She realized that his childhood had been stolen for the sake of destiny. So she lifted the ocarina and whispered a prayer to the goddess. The notes shimmered like starlight, carrying him back through the corridors of time. The moment the song ended, reality divided. In one timeline, the hero returned to his youth, carrying the wisdom of his future self. He warned the young princess, and together they prevented Ganondorf's rise. This would become the child timeline, leading to peace, but also to a new darkness yet to come. In the world he left behind, time continued without him. Ganondorf was sealed, but the kingdom he had poisoned endured centuries of fear, waiting for its hero to return. That path became the adult timeline, leading one day to a flooded world and a new oceanic age. In a third possibility, one where the hero failed, where courage was lost, the kingdom fell entirely, and the Triforce scattered across the ashes of history. That path became the fallen timeline, where legend returned to ruin and hope to memory. 3 worlds born of one decision, 3 songs woven from the same melody. When the portals of time closed, the Master Sword returned to its pedestal in the Temple of Time. Fi's spirit, ever watchful, fell silent once more. The hero's name faded from record, but his courage did not. It lingered in every age that followed, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a shout. And high above the castle towers, Zelda looked upon the dawn. The Triforce of Wisdom glowed faintly in her palm. Though she had restored balance for a moment, she knew the cycle was not broken. Power, wisdom, and courage would meet again, reshaping the world as they always had. The ocarina's last note lingered in the air, a tone of peace tinged with longing. The sound carried over the fields, over the forests, into the heart of the desert, where a single ember of hatred still burned. The legend had not ended. It had only multiplied. Chapter 5: The Fallen Hero and the Ages of Darkness. When the last note of the ocarina faded and the light of the Master Sword dimmed, the world split, and in one branch, the hero did not rise again. The battle was lost. Ganondorf's laughter echoed through the collapsing tower as the sage's seal faltered. Without the Chosen One to bear the blade, darkness overflowed in the sacred realm and spilled into the mortal world. From that moment, the Golden Land became the Dark World, and the age of the Hero of Time ended not in triumph, but in silence. The Triforce remained whole for a heartbeat. Then it was seized by the King of Evil. Ganondorf's wish twisted creation itself. The paradise that once shone with the goddess's light turned inside out. Skies bled red, rivers ran with shadow, and those who entered were changed by their own desires. It was no longer a realm of gods, but of reflection, every soul made to face the truth of its heart. Hyrule survived, but wounded. The sages who remained sealed the dark world away, sacrificing themselves to restore the barrier between realms. They chained Ganon within it, bound to the Triforce he had corrupted. And so began the era of dark and light, a time of uneasy peace when people whispered prayers not for prosperity, but for deliverance. Centuries passed. The tales of the hero of time faded into myth, and the royal bloodline carried the burden of a kingdom haunted by its own history. In those days, the 7 sages were remembered only through song, and the descendants of their line guarded the ancient seals. But evil does not die. It waits. Through the cracks of the dark world, Ganon's malice seeped into mortal dreams. A dark priest rose among men. Aghanim, scholar of forbidden rites. With promises of salvation, he won the trust of the king, and when the stars aligned, he struck. The knights of Hyrule fell. The maidens descended from the sages vanished, and the Triforce of Power's echo pulsed faintly behind the veil. The kingdom once again trembled on the edge of ruin. In a small cottage south of the castle, a boy awoke to the sound of a voice. It was not prophecy that called him, only desperation. Help me. The castle. The dungeons. The plea came from Princess Zelda herself, imprisoned by the sorcerer's design. Taking his uncle's sword and shield, the boy entered the storm. His name, Link, was carried by destiny, though he did not yet know it. Through moonlight and rain, He fought his way into the heart of the castle, freed the princess, and uncovered a secret long buried, that Aghanim sought to break the seal between worlds and resurrect Ganon. When at last the final blow fell, it was too late. Aghanim's death opened the gate he desired. Link was drawn into the dark world, where the reflection of every heart took monstrous form. There, he journeyed through the corrupted temples, freed the 7 maidens, and faced Ganon in the ruins of what had once been the sacred realm. The battle that followed was the echo of every age. Steel met shadow, courage met hatred. When the final strike landed, the Triforce shimmered before him, whole once more. It spoke without words, and Link made his wish not for domination, but for restoration. The worlds separated. The king awoke. Peace returned. Yet the wish did not end the cycle. It only mended it. The Triforce's power endures, and every wish upon it leaves a shadow behind. In time, the hero sought rest. He left Hyrule's shores by ship, searching for purpose beyond legend. But storms are seldom kind to heroes. Lightning split the sky, and the sea claimed him. He awoke on the shores of a strange island, Koholint, beneath the watchful eyes of a girl named Marin. At its center stood an egg larger than a temple, said to cradle the windfish, a being who dreamed the world itself. To leave, the hero would need to awaken it, and by doing so, end the dream. As he gathered the 8 instruments of awakening, Link began to understand the island's truth. Koholint was not real. It was the echo of his own heart, a resting place conjured by the windfish's slumber. When the final song was played, the island faded like mist at sunrise. He opened his eyes to the endless ocean, alone once more, but changed. The dream had been illusory, yet its lessons were real. Even the creations of gods can yearn for freedom. Generations later, evil stirred again, but this time its hands reached through time itself. Twin sorceresses, Kome and Kotake, sought to resurrect their fallen master by dividing his soul. Their machinations touched 2 distant lands, Holodrum, realm of flame and season, and Labrina, realm of rivers and time. In Holodrum, the hero wielded the Rod of Seasons, shifting spring to winter and storm to calm. In Labrina, he bore the Harp of Ages, crossing centuries to mend what was broken. Though separated by space and time, these 2 adventures were halves of a single design. When the twin worlds aligned, Ganon's resurrection was nearly complete, but courage once again intervened. The hero shattered the ritual, saving both realms and ensuring that even death could not guarantee the Demon King's return. Hyrule eventually rebuilt upon the bones of its past, but history leaves impressions deeper than stone. Beneath the kingdom lay its mirror, Lorule, a realm that had once possessed its own Triforce and destroyed it to end war. In its absence, their world withered. From this shadowed realm came Yuga a man who sought beauty through possession. He turned the sages to paintings, each stroke binding their souls to his canvas. When he captured Princess Zelda, his ambition revealed itself, to merge with Ganon and wield both power and art as one. The hero of this age, another who bore the timeless name Link, discovered the ability to slip between worlds, moving along walls like a living fresco. With that gift, he pursued Yuga into low rule, freed Princess Hilda from her own despair, and restored balance to both realities. For his deeds, the Triforce granted Hyrule and Lowrule a final mercy, each world reborn, each lesson learned. Two reflections no longer bound by envy, but by understanding. Peace followed, but even in peace, legend lingers. Far to the east lay the fashion-loving kingdom of Hytopia, where vanity ruled court and color-shaped status. It was there that three youths, identical in face yet distinct in heart, rose to break a witch's curse upon Princess Styla. Their tale was lighter than those before, a playful echo of destiny rather than a tragedy, but even that too is part of the cycle. For courage does not always appear upon battlefields. Sometimes it lives in laughter, or in friendship, or in the simple choice to stand together. Ages turned yet again. Kingdoms rose and fell. Knowledge faded, and only fragments of prophecy remained. The Master Sword was lost to time, the Triforce hidden again within the sacred realm. When next darkness came, it arrived not as a storm, but as a whisper. A wizard named Ganon, reborn from hatred older than memory, seized the Triforce of power and plunged Hyrule into ruin. A lone boy from the western forests took up arms to rescue Princess Zelda, who had divided the Triforce of Wisdom to keep it from the enemy's grasp. Through labyrinth and shadow, he gathered its shards, faced Ganon in the heart of Death Mountain, and restored peace once more. The people hailed him as a hero, but already the cycle turned again. Years later, the same hero wandered as a young man, guided by a mark that appeared upon his hand, the crest of the Triforce itself. He discovered another Princess Zelda, ancient and sleeping under a curse from ages past. To awaken her, he would need the third piece, courage. His journey led him across a harsher Hyrule, through temples guarded by magic older than civilization. When he claimed the final piece, the Triforce shone whole again for the first time since the fall of the Hero of Time. Zelda awoke, and for a moment the cycle seemed healed. But history in Hyrule never ends, it rests. The Decline timeline is a history of recovery, of heroes who rise from ruin rather than prevent it. Each victory restores the world, yet each age forgets the last. In this branch of time, hope survives by endurance, not perfection. The Triforce remains both blessing and burden, granting salvation even as it tempts those who seek it. The bloodline of Hylia continues, thinner with every generation, but unbroken. And somewhere, buried beneath temples and legends, the Master Sword still dreams. As centuries drift into myth, scholars will debate whether these events were sequential or symbolic, whether the heroes were one soul reborn or many chosen hearts. But to the goddess, it matters little. Each era proves the same truth, that even in failure, courage persists. The winds of destiny turn again, carrying whispers toward another future, toward a world reborn from flood and memory. The story will change shape, but the melody remains. For every time darkness falls, the spirit of the hero will answer. Chapter 6: The Child Timeline. When the Song of Time ended, the boy opened his eyes in the temple once more. He was young again, the sword too heavy for his hands, the future erased behind him like footprints in rain. But knowledge remained. He ran to the courtyard where the princess waited, her eyes bright with the innocence of a world not yet broken. And there, breathless, he told her everything. He spoke of the desert king who would come, of the Triforce's fracture, and of the 7 years lost. Zelda listened, not with disbelief, but with quiet fear. Something in her heart already knew the truth. Together, they went to the king. Ganondorf's ambition was revealed before the seed could sprout, and his path to the sacred realm was sealed. The hero of time's task was complete, and yet destiny seldom ends with peace. The boy left the castle behind. He wandered into the woods, seeking a friend who had faded from memory, the fairy who had guided him through childhood and vanished when the sword returned to rest. Through forest and fog he searched until one evening the trees grew strange and the ground hollow. The air bent like a mirror. He crossed a threshold without meaning to, and the world changed. He awoke beneath a foreign sky. The moon hung too close, its face twisted. He had fallen into Termina, a world parallel to Hyrule, shaped by reflection and regret. Its people were familiar, yet not the same. Echoes of those he'd known, rearranged by fate's hand. And within this world was a mischievous being, dwelling in a living mask, Majora. Once a relic of an ancient tribe, this living mask held a will of its own, a hunger for chaos. In the hands of a skull kid, lonely and bitter, it found the perfect vessel. For 3 days, the moon descended, threatening to shatter the world. The hero, stripped of title and memory, raced against time itself. He learned the Ocarina's song anew, not to traverse ages, but to loop them, living in the same 3 days, again and again, until the pattern could be broken. Each cycle carried its own sorrow, lovers torn apart, spirits bound to masks, children who feared to grow. Link gathered their stories like lanterns, and with every kindness, the darkness weakened. At last, atop the clock tower, he faced Majora as the final hour struck. Through courage and empathy, the virtues that outlive all timelines, he freed the Skull Kid and purified the mask. Termina's sky cleared. Dawn returned. But when he rode away into the mist, no one saw where he went. Some say he sought the lost fairy still. Others whisper that he never returned at all, that he became a silent guardian, wandering forever between worlds. Whatever the truth, his legend ended softly, a lullaby rather than a triumph. Centuries later, the echo of that hero's courage stirred again. Hyrule had grown vast and proud, its castles gleaming above fields of endless green. Yet beneath that peace lingered an old wound. The Gerudo king, who had once sought the Triforce, still lived, imprisoned yet unrepentant. For his crimes, the gods had cast him into another realm, the Twilight Realm, home of banished spirits and forgotten light. From that exile came corruption. The veil between worlds thinned, and shadows began to crawl across the kingdom. When the sun set, twilight lingered too long, turning men to beasts. Only the creatures of the dark remained visible. In the small village of Ordon lived another youth named Link, humble and kind. He herded goats, dreamed of the royal guard, and thought little of prophecy. But when the twilight reached his borders, the light ripped from his body and remade him. He awoke on 4 paws, shackled and afraid, a wolf in the land of fading sun. In chains, he met Midna, a being of twilight, clever and sharp-tongued. She freed him not out of mercy, but necessity. She sought to reclaim her realm from the usurper Zant, who had seized power with a fragment of divine aid. Their alliance was uneasy, but as they traveled from forest to mountain, to lake to desert, their bond deepened. Link learned that the shadow need not be evil, and Midna learned that light need not be cruel. Together, they restored the fragments of the fused shadows, ancient relics of the Twilight race. With each victory, the veil thinned further until they confronted Zant himself. He raged and trembled, crying that his power came from another, from the ancient king still imprisoned in the void. Ganondorf returned, not in flesh, but spirit, wearing Zant's body like a glove. The battle that followed was both ancient and new, wolf and princess, hero and tyrant. Steel rang, magic shattered, and when the final blow fell, Midna stood between the realms, her form revealed, not imp or shadow, but radiant princess, much like Zelda herself. Her farewell was quiet. Link, I'll see you again. Words that betrayed what she knew, but perhaps were her hopes. Then she broke the mirror that joined their worlds, sealing her and her people away once more. Generations later, when peace had aged into complacency again, Hyrule faced a subtler danger. From the desert returned a dark sorcerer named Vati. reborn through ancient magic. He sought the maidens who protected the royal seal, the same line of sages that had bound Ganon ages before. To confront him, the hero of that age drew the Four Sword, a relic said to divide one soul into many. In a flash of light, he became four, each a reflection of his heart: valor, wisdom, joy, and determination. Together, they pursued Vati across mountain and marsh, freeing the maidens and learning that a darker will hid behind his resurrection. The seal that bound Ganon was weakening again. The Gerudo king sought rebirth through Vati's hand. But the Four Swords' unity triumphed where single strength could not. Ganon fell once more, and the heroes returned to one. The sword was sealed within its shrine, awaiting another hand. Thus, the child timeline carried on, a path where the hero's warning had saved Hyrule from the first cataclysm, but not from the endless pattern of renewal. In every age, the same truth repeated. Even when the darkness is restrained, its shadow remains. By the end of this branch of time, Hyrule was quieter, older, and wiser. The Sheikah's red eyes had faded from sight, their machines buried beneath the soil. The bloodline of the goddess endured, though its memory grew faint. And in the royal chronicles, scribes wrote of a promise that when twilight returned, light would answer again. Chapter 7: The Adult Timeline. After the hero of time departed for another life, his world continued to turn. Generations passed, the memory of his deeds becoming myth, told beside hearth fires. But deep beneath Hyrule Castle, the seal that held the evil king began to shudder. Without the hero's spirit to answer destiny's call, the balance that bound power, wisdom, and courage trembled once more. The skies darkened. Storms gathered over the land as if the heavens themselves mourned what they foresaw. And in that darkness, Ganon returned. The kingdom had grown complacent in peace. Its knights were few, its faith scattered across centuries of comfort. When Ganon rose again, there was no hero to meet him. Cities fell, the royal army scattered, and at last, even Hyrule Castle stood besieged. Princess Zelda, last of the royal line, prayed to the gods for salvation. Her plea was answered, but not in mercy. The goddesses looked down upon the kingdom they had nurtured since creation and saw that its corruption could no longer be cleansed by mortal hands. They chose instead to preserve what was pure. With tears of rain, they drowned the land, sealing both Hyrule and its evil beneath an endless sea. The highest peaks became islands. The towers of the old world vanished beneath blue silence, and those who survived awoke to a new age, the age of the Great Sea. Centuries passed. The flood became legend, the flood's cause forgotten. Children grew on small islands, each believing theirs the whole world. They sailed between horizons that never seemed to end. The ocean their field, the sky their ceiling, On Outset Island, a boy came of age by wearing a green tunic in honor of the ancient hero, an old superstition meant to invite courage into the heart. One such boy wore the garb with pride. His name, once again, was Link. That morning, the sky was clear, the gulls at play, until the shadow of a monstrous bird crossed the sun. It carried a struggling girl in its talons, the pirate captain named Tetra. In the chaos that followed, Link's own sister was stolen away, and so the cycle began anew, not by prophecy, but by love. Armed first with little more than a wooden blade and stubborn resolve, Link set out to rescue his sister. He joined Tetra's crew, sailed the open sea, and crossed paths with a talking boat whose eyes held ancient sorrow. The King of Red Lions, he called himself, a vessel bound by magic, a remnant of the drowned King Daphne's Nohansan Hyrule. He revealed to Link that the sea hid an entire kingdom below, frozen in time, waiting for its destiny to be rewritten. The quest to defeat Ganon once more led the boy across the great sea, to the forests of the Koroks, descendants of the Kokiri, to the isles of the Rito, evolved from the Zora who once swam beneath the waters. Each island carried a fragment of the past, reshaped by the ocean's mercy. Guided by the Wind Waker, a conductor's baton infused with divine power, Link learned to command the very air. With its song, he summoned cyclones, shifted day to night, and stirred the slumbering spirits of the gods themselves. Together with Tetra, whose boldness mirrored Zelda's ancient wisdom, he sought the lost Triforce of Courage, its shards scattered across the sea like stars fallen into water. When they descended into the frozen halls of old Hyrule, the truth revealed itself. Tetra was Zelda reborn, her pirate guise the goddess's spirit disguised among mortals. The King of Red Lions shed his wooden form, standing once more as the lost monarch of a kingdom drowned to save the world. He entrusted the children with the Triforce, bidding them confront the darkness that had survived the flood. Deep beneath the waves, Ganon waited in a chamber lit by the sea above. His voice was calm now, heavy with centuries of thought. My country lay within a vast desert. When the sun rose into the sky, a burning wind punished my lands, searing the world. And when the moon climbed into the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing: death. But the winds that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind, I suppose. Link and Zelda fought against Ganondorf side by side, blade and light intertwined. When the final strike came, King Daphnes used the Triforce to wish not for restoration, but for hope. Gods of the Triforce, hear that which I desire. Hope. I desire hope for these children. Give them a future. Wash away this ancient land of Hyrule. Let a ray of hope shine on the future of the world. The ocean cascaded down, sealing the kingdom forever. Ganon turned to stone, the Master Sword pinning him beneath the waves. Above, sunlight broke through the clouds. The new age had no Hyrule, but it had hope. The children sailed away, leaving the king to sleep with his dreams. Link and Tetra continued their voyage, charting waters beyond any known map. One morning, they discovered a ghostly ship gliding through fog, its hull silent, its deck empty. When Tetra leapt aboard, the vessel swallowed her in light. Link followed, awakening in an unfamiliar ocean ruled by a spirit named Linebeck, a sailor equal parts coward and charm. Together, they pursued the ghost ship, whose curse drew souls into endless sleep. Their journey led them to the Temple of the Ocean King, a labyrinth where time itself drained life away. Within its depths lay the Phantom Hourglass, a vessel that measured courage rather than sand. With each descent, Link's strength grew. Each rescue of lost spirits replenished the temple's fading light. At last, he faced Bellum, the nightmare that haunted the seas, and freed Tetra and her crew from its grasp. When dawn rose, they found themselves back where their journey began, as if no time had passed at all. Perhaps the adventure had been a dream, or perhaps dreams are simply another kind of sea. They sailed onward, seeking land, and destiny led them to it. Generations turned again. The sea receded. New continents rose. From the survivors of the Great Sea came a new kingdom, new Hyrule, blessed by spirits of the land. The old gods slept, replaced by guardian deities, bound to railways of divine metal. The spirit tracks that linked sacred temples across the realm. Here, another Princess Zelda ruled, wise, willful, and endlessly curious. When a scheming chancellor plotted to resurrect an ancient demon, Malladus, he struck down Zelda's body and imprisoned her spirit. Only a young engineer named Link, keeper of the royal train, could hear her voice. Together, boy and ghost, they traveled the tracks of fate, mending the kingdom's broken lines. Their quest was one of faith as much as adventure, to restore the guardians, reunite Zelda's soul with her body, and prevent the demon's return. In the final battle, Zelda herself took form in a towering armor of sacred gold, standing beside Link as equal rather than monarch. When victory came, she smiled, not as goddess reborn, but as a friend who had learned what it meant to be human. The rails gleamed once more, connecting the new world as veins of light. Steam hissed, engines sang, and for the first time in ages, Hyrule's song was not of sorrow, but of progress. The adult timeline is both elegy and renewal. The flood that drowned Hyrule did not end its spirit, it set it free, scattering the seeds of courage across an endless horizon. Each island, each wave, each gust of wind carries a memory of the kingdom that once was. the gods withdrew, allowing mortals to chart their own stars, and perhaps that was always their intention, to teach creation how to stand without its makers. Somewhere beneath the ocean's heart, the Master Sword still rests, its blade embedded in the petrified king. Above, gulls circle a ship whose sails catch every dawn, and on distant rails that hum like music, steam whistles echo the same eternal refrain. The world changes, but legend endures. Chapter 8: The New Age of Hyrule. The timelines had drifted for so long that no one could say how they found their way back together. Some claimed the gods themselves drew the strands of history into one thread again, merging the echoes of fallen worlds into a single new reality. Others whispered of ancient travelers, heroes and scholars whose actions bent time itself, weaving the broken pasts into one enduring present. But whatever the cause, whether divine or accidental, a new timeline dawned upon the world, and with it came the Zonai. They descended from the heavens like stars breaking through cloud. They were not gods, but the children of gods, beings wrought from the same essence as the golden goddesses, carrying fragments of the goddesses' will within their blood. They were architects of creation, sculptors of light and stone. The Zonai brought with them knowledge that seemed like magic to mortals, materials that defied gravity, energy that pulsed through their hands like breath. They carved temples into mountains and raised platforms that hovered in the air, balancing the world between heaven and earth. At their head stood Rauru, a figure of calm and immense wisdom, and beside him walked Sonia, a mortal queen whose compassion was said to be the equal of the goddess herself. Together, they founded a kingdom, the first Hyrule of this new timeline, unifying the surface peoples under a banner of light. Rauru ruled not as conqueror, but as custodian. He and Sonia taught their subjects to honor balance, power guided by wisdom, courage tempered by mercy. Under their reign, the world prospered. The Sheikah rose again as keepers of knowledge. The Hylians spread across green plains and shimmering lakes, and the spirits of old returned to watch over the land. For the first time in countless ages, the kingdom seemed whole, an echo of the paradise the goddesses had once dreamed. Yet beneath that light, a shadow moved. In the far desert, the Gerudo thrived as they always had, proud, fierce, and bound by tradition. And among them was born a man whose presence seemed to darken the very air, Ganondorf. He was unlike any of his kin before him, brilliant, commanding, and utterly unafraid of gods. He saw the power of the Zonai not as miracle, but as challenge. To him, their kingdom was not divine, only unjust, and in his heart grew the same hunger that had doomed the world 1,000 times before. He sought not merely power, but equilibrium through conquest. If the gods ruled from the sky, he would claim the earth. If light reigned over the day, he would crown himself Lord of Night. At first, Ganondorf cloaked his intentions in loyalty. He came to Raru's court as emissary, bearing gifts and words of peace. The mortal kings saw a noble warrior. The sages saw a necessary ally. But Sonia, ever perceptive, sensed a storm behind his smile. Her doubts proved true when calamity struck the heart of the kingdom. Through deception and murder, Ganondorf stole the secret stone, one of the sacred jewels through which the Zonai channeled divine power. Its energy fused with his hatred, transforming him into something more than mortal, the Demon King. The skies split open, and the ground bled. Those who witnessed his ascension said it was as though the very void had taken form again. Demons spread across the land at his command. Raru gathered the champions of the realm, the sages of wind, water, fire, and lightning, and together they stood against him. But the Demon King's power was boundless. Even the gods' children faltered before his rage. The battle that followed would be remembered as the Sealing War. And in the end, victory came at a price beyond measure. Raru knew that the Demon King could not be destroyed, for his power had fused with the essence of the world itself, the same power that flowed from the Triforce. And so, in one final act of sacrifice, Raru invoked the divine energy of his own secret stone. He bound his life to the seal, trapping Ganondorf in his own grasp that he would maintain over the next age. With the Demon King sealed away, Hyrule lived on. Their descendants continued into the New Age. By the time the next millennium dawned, both Raru and Ganon had faded from memory, and the Zonai civilization had waned. As Ganon remained trapped in Raru's grasp, his malice would grow, eventually boiling over and leaking out into the world that continued on above them. This would create a phenomenon known as Calamity Ganon, a manifestation of Ganon's rage that would attack Hyrule over and over. To contend with this threat, Hyrule would cultivate technological marvels to combat the evil. They built guardians, vast mechanical arachnids whose eyes glowed with tranquil blue. They rose towers that reached to the heavens, and shrines beneath the hills that whispered with encoded prayer. As Calamity Ganon was pushed back time and time again, the Sheikah became the custodians of this secret war, quietly preparing the world for the Calamity Ganon's return and the hero who would eventually stop him. Until one day, Calamity Ganon's malice overflowed. It infected all the guardians that were built to stop him. It turned Hyrule's defense against it. And at the return of Hyrule's darkest hour, it was left defenseless. Cities fell in minutes. The king perished defending the citadel, and Princess Zelda was forced to awaken the power in her blood before its time. With a cry that shook the heavens, she sealed the calamity away, but at a cost. Her chosen knight, mortally wounded, was carried to an ancient chamber to sleep until healed. Zelda was left alone to hold the darkness at bay for 100 years until the day Link would reawaken. The wind was gentle the morning he awoke. The stone door slid open, and the boy who had been dead for a century stepped into sunlight. He remembered nothing, not his name, not his promise, only the ache of purpose. The Sheikah slate in his hand glowed softly, a relic of the age that had killed its makers. The world around him was vast and quiet, nature grown over civilization's grave. The calamity still coiled around the distant castle like a storm that never ended, and within that spiral of crimson malice, Princess Zelda continued to hold the darkness at bay, her body ageless, her spirit bound to duty. The hero's task was clear, even if his memory was not. Awaken the power of the divine beasts, colossal constructs shaped like creatures of old, and reclaim the courage that had once defined him. Each region he crossed was a reflection of an older Hyrule. Rito soaring from cliffside Eyrie, Goron forges still burning with Din's ancient flame, Gerudo sands whispering songs of their exiled king, and the Zora's domain threatened by an eternal rain. Link's journey was not one of discovery, but of remembering. He freed the spirits of the fallen champions who had died defending the kingdom a century before, each forgiving him with smiles brighter than sorrow. At last, he reached the castle and found Zelda waiting, not in a tower, but in the light itself. Together, they faced the calamity's final form, a boar of malice whose roar was the echo of every Ganon that had ever been. When the Master Sword struck true, the darkness dissolved into dawn. Zelda looked to the horizon, her voice quiet. Let us rebuild, not the Hyrule that was, but the one that can be. And so began the rebirth. Chapter 9: Ganondorf's Return and Zelda's Sacrifice. The calamity was over. For the first time in a century, the air above Hyrule Castle carried only the smell of rain and stone. The black storm that had circled its towers was gone, and the land exhaled as though waking from a long nightmare. Grass grew again on the scarred fields. The wind that once howled with malice now whispered peace. Princess Zelda stood on the castle's balcony at dawn, watching sunset touch the ruins. Beside her, silent as ever, waited Link, the knight who had returned from death itself. They were not rulers now, nor saviors, only two people trying to understand the world that had survived them. The years following the calamity were an age of study. Zelda turned her intellect toward the mysteries left behind by the Sheikah, the towers that had watched the war, the shrines that tested courage, the half-buried machines that had once obeyed her command. If the kingdom was to thrive again, she reasoned, it had to remember what it had forgotten. Link followed wherever she led, through forests, across dry bones of guardians scattered like the remains of ancient titans. Together, They descended below Hyrule Castle, torches flickering against walls that had not seen light in millennia. The air grew cooler, denser, tinged with the metallic scent of old magic. Soon, the carved stone gave way to another kind of architecture, smooth, precise, patterned with faintly glowing spirals. These were not Sheikah markings. They pulsed a gentle green. They had reached what was left behind by the Zonai. For centuries, the Zonai had been a myth, half-remembered sky spirits said to have vanished before Hyrule's founding. Yet here, beneath the castle, their language covered the walls like ivy of light. Glyphs told stories no historian had recorded, gods descending from the heavens, a king crowned in radiant scales, and beneath them, a figure wreathed in shadow, Ganondorf, depicted not as man, but as calamity incarnate. Zelda traced the carving with her fingers. This is older than the kingdom. At the corridor's end yawned a vast cavern. Its ceiling glimmered with mineral stars, and in the center stood a shape exuding the malice and gloom of ages imprisoned. Sealed in place by a hand glowing with divine energy. From the desiccated figure leaked an aura so potent that the air itself seemed to rot. When they approached, the seal broke. The hand released its grip, and the body stirred. Ganondorf, the demon king of the First Age, was free. With his seal broken, his power erupted across the land, and the earth shook. Link attacked in defense of Zelda, but was easily overpowered by the Demon King's festering hatred. As the ground beneath them split open, Zelda fell into the caverns below. Link reached for her, but his arm and sword were destroyed by the Demon King's power. As the world collapsed around them, Zelda disappeared into a burst of golden light. Link awoke later under an unknown sky, high above the world, his destroyed arm replaced by the spectral limb of Rauru, the same arm that had sealed away Ganondorf. Through Rauru's whispers, Link learned to wield the ancient power of the Zonai through the strange green energy of his new arm. He descended to the surface and discovered the vast islands that now floated above Hyrule, relics of the ancient kingdom restored by divine upheaval. The sages of wind, fire, water, lightning, and spirit each awoke in their new incarnations, swearing oaths to aid him. But Zelda was gone, vanished not in death, but in time. The light that had swallowed her carried her backward, past the ruins, past the wars, into a world not yet named. When her vision cleared, she stood on a field bathed in dawn, surrounded by birds whose species no scholar had recorded. And before her stood Rauru and Sonia, alive. Their forms radiated divinity. Zelda told them everything: the calamity, the centuries of ruin, the awakening beneath the castle. Rauru listened in silence. He and Sonia sheltered her within their court, where she witnessed the first Hyrule in its glory. Temples gleaming, sky islands alive with color. But her arrival had altered fate. Soon, whispers of unrest reached the palace. a Gerudo warlord, plotting rebellion, a man who had once sworn loyalty to the crown. Zelda knew the name before she heard it spoken: Ganondorf. She watched history repeat itself. Ganondorf's betrayal came sudden and brutal. He murdered Sonia, stole her secret stone, and ascended as the Demon King. Rauru rallied the sages, but the outcome was foregone. The Demon King's might dwarfed their own. When at last Rauru sacrificed himself to seal the enemy, Zelda wept, not as princess, but as witness, knowing how long that seal would last and what it would cost the future. As Zelda desperately pondered how to change the course of history, she found herself faced with a terrible choice. She had learned from another Zonai that ingesting secret stones would transform one into a dragon at the cost of their mind and will. She understood that by making this sacrifice, she could restore the Master Sword to its full power over the following ages. Taking Raru's secret stone, she made her decision. She called upon the power of gods, sacrificing her mortal form to become the Light Dragon, a being of endless life and radiant grace. With the Master Sword embedded in her crown, she rose into the sky, letting centuries wash over her. She would circle the world endlessly, mindless, allowing the sword to heal in her divine light until the age came when the hero could wield it again. Countless ages later, Link would recover Zelda's memories of the past through her tears, coming to understand her sacrifice and the path that she had laid out before him. With the Master Sword recovered and his destiny made clear, Link returned to the depths below Hyrule Castle to challenge the Demon King. The sages of the New World gathered beside him, their ancestors' oaths echoing in their hearts. Together, they faced the Demon King once more. Magic and steel clashed, echoes of every war that had come before. Just as the Demon King Ganondorf's defeat seemed certain, Ganondorf made the ultimate sacrifice himself, ingesting his own secret stone and transforming into a demonic dragon of immense power. The battle quickly burst forth from the depths of the earth into the skies above, where Link found himself joined by the Light Dragon. Together, they faced the Demon Dragon in a storm of crimson gloom and gold radiance. Link rode upon the Light Dragon's back, striking downward as she guided him. When the Master Sword finally entered the Demon Dragon's heart, the curse that had haunted creation since demise fractured and dissolved. Darkness did not explode. It exhaled, finally at rest. The Demon King turned to ash. At the same time, the spirits of Rauru and Sonia manifested one last time in Link. Combining their powers of light and time, they reversed the Light Dragon to its previous incarnation, restoring Zelda to her Hylian form. In the aftermath of their struggle to save Hyrule from its curse, Zelda, Link, and the sages reflected on the wishes of the Zonai for Hyrule to experience eternal peace. Together, They devoted themselves to this cause and the protection of Hyrule. In the days that followed, there was only rebuilding, laughter, and wind over the grass, and for the first time in eternity, the legend slept, not as a tragedy, but as a fulfilled promise. Thank you for listening. If this journey through Hyrule helped you rest, dream, or simply feel a little wonder again, please consider leaving a like, subscribe, and returning when the next legend begins.